All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Independent Podcast. I'm your host, Fernando Garcia, and I am here with a very special guest, John Samuel Williams, who is running for the 51st for running for Congress in the 51st District of California. John, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here. And tell me a little bit about, where you come from, how you grew up, what got you to the point of, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw my name in the hat and, be part of the process of running for Congress and putting yourself out there. How did you get to that point?
Well, first off, I just really appreciate you having me on the show, and I really appreciate your platform, and just wanting to get that information out there and let people decide for themselves. I appreciate this kind of media and journalism, like everything about this show. Like what I've watched a few episodes, like
Yeah,
the way you conduct yourself and the way you ask questions is awesome. I really appreciate it, and I'm
thank you.
looking forward to just answering your questions about myself. My name is John Samuel. I'm born and raised in San Diego. I'm a San Diego native. I've lived here all my life. The only other place I've lived outside of San Diego, California is actually South Korea.
Oh, wow.
Um, I lived there for 10 years. That's actually where I met my wife. My two
Awesome.
daughters were born there. So that's the only other place that I've lived. I'm from here. My family is from here. My mom and my dad actually met here, but my grandfather was in the Navy, so
Oh,
they
wow.
moved around a lot. So,
Mhm.
but they are actually from the South, so from Alabama. So my dad's side of the family is from the South. My mom's side of the family, our family is from Mexico.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
my grandfather, my great grandmother actually was pregnant with my grandfather when she came. They crossed the river and they came over here actually, and
Wow.
then he was born here in Cochise. I'm
Okay.
sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but I've
That's
only
okay.
ever seen it. I've only ever seen it on his birth certificate.
Yeah.
Cochise.
Okay.
And then he came out here and he actually ended up joining the military as well. He fought in the Korean War, and as well as my other grandfather. And then
Wow.
he worked for, I think it was a genie for like almost like 30 years
Oh, wow.
before he passed away when I was probably about 10 years old.
Okay. Wow. So your family definitely kind of has lived that American experience. Excuse me. And having that immigrant mother from Mexico's, and then also your father from the South. I mean,
Yeah,
they've really experienced America from different perspectives, and I'm
yeah.
pretty sure those perspectives kind of had an impact on you as well. Um,
Profound impact. I
yeah,
mean, growing up, like that was always the kind of dichotomy in my life was, people would always ask me like, "Oh, what do you identify more with?
yeah,
Do you identify with your Mexican side or your black side?" And like I wrestled with that for so long, that identity, and any biracial kid probably goes through the same struggle.
uh-huh,
And eventually how I reconciled is I my personal faith in Christ. When I came to faith in Christ, it kind of brought everything together to where that was like the center of my identity, and it allowed me to just be who I am. I
yeah,
didn't have to choose one or the other because growing up in school, I had some of the African American community would be like, "Oh, well, you don't really act black, and you talk different than us, and you don't dress
yeah,
the same way, and you listen to Red Hot Chili Peppers, and you like all this other crazy stuff." And then like on the
yeah,
other hand, I'd be like, okay, well, my mom's Mexican, like I'm Mexican too. And then
right,
they'd be like, and Mexican would be like, oh well, you don't really speak Spanish well, and
yeah,
you don't really dress that way. So it was like that had a big effect on me. But when I reconciled that, I actually realized it was like one of my greatest strengths. And
hmm,
being able to have those two perspectives, it really influenced a lot, especially the way, now the way I want to govern and the way I look at things is because, I mean, that's America. Like you just
yeah,
said, like that's the American experience is you come here and we're all from different backgrounds, but we come together under this banner of wanting to do something greater for ourselves, greater for our family.
right,
My grandpa grew up in, not even just the Jim Crow South. He grew up when it was like 1930s, like he could be lynched for no reason
right, yeah,
and nothing would happen,
yeah,
and he's told me some stories that would put some hair on your
yeah, yeah,
on
yeah,
your neck.
yeah, 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 and that's the thing about we the American experiment, that we're living, and bringing people from all over the world, and I deal with it myself, where people want to put you in a box, where you came from, where your family's from, your name, your last name. Um, and I know that uh, I wish we can kind of almost a lot of people like to use things like pronouns and different things like that. Well, why don't people, it'd be great to live in a country where it's just, hey, I'm a nice person, I'm a giving person, I'm a believer in my community, follower of God, just somebody who's trying to do better, whatever external parts, but that's who I am inside. uh,
Yeah.
and I think getting to the root of that, um, hopefully we as a nation can get closer to that.
And you touched on something that I think was really important is like taking the focus off these external things that don't really define us.
Hmm.
Like, my whole life people want to define me. Are you black? Are you Mexican?
Right. Yeah.
And like I always felt a little bit disingenuous when I would be like, okay, I went through phases, I'm not gonna lie, where I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I'll
Right.
I'll wear the Iversons, I'll wear all this stuff, I'll get my
Yeah.
hair, I'll do
Yeah.
all these things, and then I just didn't feel like I was being true to myself. And
Sure.
on the opposite end, I did the same thing, and it was never quite right. And
Hmm.
I just think like one of the reasons why I'm running as well is because people try to put me in a box as well because I'm a Republican, and
Hmm.
if I showed you some of the messages I've received, it would make you blush.
Yeah.
Um, because everybody wants to put me in a box. When I first started posting videos, actually, I'll tell you this. I didn't do this intentionally. Actually, I was making videos about why I'm running all this stuff, and my wife actually brought up, she's, "Oh, you didn't put your party on there." And I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, you're right, I didn't." And like it wasn't intentional. I wasn't trying to be disingenuous. I just, in my mind, it wasn't that important. I just want to show people who I am. And people are commenting and they're like, "Yeah, I'm down with this message. I appreciate that. We need more of this,
Yeah.
right?" And then the second they found out I was a Republican, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, how they turned. And then
Right.
people were like, "No, I'll never vote for you.
Yeah.
You're a racist. You're a Nazi supporter. You're all this." And I'm like, "But 2 seconds ago, you were all for the
Right.
platform." And that just showcased for me like one of the reasons why I'm running is because like we've made politics about putting people into these boxes instead about who they are. you
Right.
know if someone gets to know me as a person, like you just said, and they don't like it and they think I'm not going to be a good policymaker and a good representative, then that's fine, I'll
Yeah.
accept that and I'll move on. But if you want to just say you don't want to vote for me just because I'm a Republican, I feel like that's a bit disingenuous. Like, get to
Right.
know me as a man.
Right.
One of the people I admire the most, as we all do, MLK, he said,
Yeah.
we want to be judged by the content of our character,
Right.
rather than the color of our skin. But here it is, we're judging by the content of our party
Right.
rather than
Right.
the content of my character.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is because I feel like politics has gotten to this place where we have just decided to label people instead of find out who they are, what they're about, what kind of character they have, what kind of leadership skills they have, what kind of qualifications they have, and then basing our decision based off of that rather than their party, their skin color, their orientation. All these other things have gotten in the way of, I believe, what makes a good politician. And that's
Mhm.
my main platform. That's why I'm running, is to,
Yeah.
bring that political integrity back to politics, number one. And number two is to help my community, to make my community more affordable again, because
Mhm.
as we all know, San Diego has just become this American dream that's almost unattainable, you
Mhm.
know, anymore. And just to show people like, okay, let's get back to a place in politics where we can disagree. And I've said that before, and I don't know, I want people to understand what I mean by that. What I mean is, I want to get back to a place where we don't have to agree on every little thing, but we can agree on the greater good. You know,
Right.
we
Yeah.
can disagree on some things, because the truth is, I'm not going to lie about my positions and values that I hold dear. I'm going to be honest with you, but I also believe that some of those things don't influence, are not going to influence the way that I lead, because I believe in putting the greater good above even, sometimes our own feelings,
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's what, our founding fathers did. Is, they
Mhm.
had a lot of crazy ideas. I'm a big history nerd. So
Yeah.
if you look at some of the things they believed, it's pretty wild,
Right.
but I don't believe that kind of, just eliminates all the good that they did in building the foundation of our country.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, what led you to running as a Republican and being a Republican? Why do you choose to be a Republican?
Well, to do that, we got to kind of rewind a little bit back to
Okay.
college.
Okay.
And that was a long time ago. Man, I'm
Yeah.
old. And that's the thing is, oh, that's the other thing, by the way. I'll be honest, I'm 30, I'm turning 39 this year.
Mhm.
But I think at first some people were commenting on my videos and everything, oh, like you're too young or something like this, and I'm like, I guess I should take that as like a compliment or
Right,
something.
right.
But I was like, I'm 39 years old. I have 3 kids.
Right.
That's why that's part of the reason why initially in college I started growing facial hair, because people would always think I'm like a kid or something.
Yeah.
But in college, I was a diehard Republican. I voted for Obama. I remember the moment he won. I was in college in my dorm room. People were running out into the quad, and it was just a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
And some of the things that started to shift was, even in that campaign and later campaigns, where I just saw the way people were treating the Republicans then, and I was about that. I was like, oh, they're racist, they're
Right.
xenophobic, they're all this. And I saw just the way some of them would act, like even John McCain. I don't know if you remember in his town hall where that lady stood up and she was like, oh, what did she say? Obama's a terrorist or a Muslim or something?
Yes.
And he cold stopped it right there. He was like,
Right.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. He's like, he's a good man. He's like, we just have different values and principles. And that really stuck in my mind, because if you fast forward today, that I don't feel like that really happens anymore.
Right.
And so slowly over time, it's not just one thing. These questions started to go about in my mind, and I grew up, I got a family, and just I started to realize my values didn't align with the Democratic Party anymore. And like I couldn't reconcile that within myself. And also too, one thing that started to bother me is, for example, instead of people asking me why I was voting for a certain candidate, they kind of expected me to vote one way because of my skin tone.
Right.
And that to me really bothered me, because I'm like, why do I have to vote for somebody for a party just because of my skin color?
Yeah.
And me being a smart aleck and a history nerd, I was like, well, first off, the Democratic Party was the one who was advocating for slavery anyways.
Right.
And they were the ones who did the internment camps. That was Democratic Party. I'm not saying I'm putting this on them exactly. I'm just saying, if you want to put me in that box, we can look at historically what the Democratic Party represents. And, for me, then I'm going to be like, well, I'm not going to be about somebody putting me in that box and trying to tell me how to vote just because of that. And so I just started to take a hard look at it, and I was like, okay, for better or for worse, let me look at these candidates and what their values are, and let me see, do they agree with me or do they not agree with me? And by and large, the Republican Party values aligned with mine. And I still tell people today, if we want to get into details, and I'm sure we will, there's a lot of things I believe the Republican Party is doing that are shooting themselves in the foot, and I don't agree with, and I don't consign with. But a lot of those values just started to align more with how I felt inside, and so that's why I officially became a Republican. But to be honest with you, before I was I considered myself a pretty like a moderate, and I considered running as an independent. So that was my original thought. But the reason why I settled on being a Republican is because I realized we're going to get to a point in shows like this or talking on somebody, and they're going to realize, hey, Johnny, you got some pretty conservative values. Like these are more conservative. And I didn't want to seem disingenuous, like I was running as an independent just to get votes.
Gotcha.
So I was like, okay, most of my values do align with the Republican Party, whether I agree with most of the things they're doing or not. So I think that it's morally correct to just say I'm a Republican versus an independent, because I don't think that would be completely true.
Yeah. Got it. Well, that's a great explanation of how you got to that point. Tell me a little bit about, for those people who don't know about the 51st district, tell me what are some of the, you don't have to, a brief synopsis of the area, who you're currently running against. And also, I mean, hey, you're getting an early jump right now, because I think as of now, it's just you and the incumbent that are actually officially running.
Yeah.
But if you can tell us a little bit about District 51 and who you're running against, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So District 51 is a pretty encompassing area. It's San Carlos. You got you got El Cajon, you got Linda Vista, you got Mission Valley, you got parts of Tierra Santa, you got the college area. So if you're from San Diego and these are actually pretty diverse. Like, for example, El Cajon tends to be more conservative.
Right.
Mission Valley is more affluent, tends to be more Democratic. The college area tends to be more Democratic. When you get more east, it tends to be more conservative. But I think what we're seeing is like kind of shifting because a lot of the issues are starting to be more encompassing.
Yeah.
For example, like it's not limited to one area. Like we're all facing the struggles of inflation. We're all facing the struggles of cost of living, homelessness crisis. These are some of the issues facing this area. Childcare, just things like taxes. They just try to pass, two new taxes in San Diego, both of which
Right.
were voted down.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um, Tax everything except the air we breathe. Um,
Right. That's next.
yeah, right. But so that's the area, and I'm actually my family, we've lived everywhere in San Diego. My parents, they got divorced when I was younger, but we've jumped around. I've lived in Kensington, that's also part of this
Mhm.
district. Kensington, Normal Heights, North Park, Southeast San Diego, Chula Vista. We had our home there. Um, and actually, where I'm living now is my grandparents' home in San Carlos.
Okay.
And it's funny because even though we moved around a lot, I was always here because my grandparents, they essentially helped raise me.
Right.
And, I would come over here all the time. So this has kind of been like my solid home that's always been there,
Right.
my entire life is here. And, both of them passed away last year,
Oh, wow.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, so this is where I'm living now. And the current representative is Sarah Jacobs. I'm
Hmm.
sure most people know her and her family because their
Yep.
name's on everything.
Right.
Um, the Qualcomm family,
Yeah.
worth about a couple billion. I think herself, she's worth an upwards of like $70 million, something like
Right.
that. So she's been the incumbent here for, I think now she's in her second or third term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Not to interrupt, I was going to let
yeah,
you know,
no,
and
good.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I actually ran against her in Congress when she originally her first, not her first row of, she first ran for a district
In
up in North.
2018,
Yeah,
right?
yes, in 2018 I ran in that one. But
Oh,
before that, she ran in 2016 up in a district in Northern County. She lost that one and then came down here.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I did run it. That was there was literally I want to say like 15 candidates in that primary because
Shoot.
it was an open seat, and
Okay.
so a lot of people jumped in, and myself included. So I am familiar, and it's difficult to run against somebody who has so much money, and when 85%, I think it's 85% of the time, the person with the most money typically wins. Right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and you're just the reality is you're just not going to outspend her from unless you come from that type of wealth as well.
Absolutely
Um,
not.
and so the fact that I think it's great that you're getting a head start
Mhm.
in doing shows like this because grassroots and getting your name out there first does play a big part. So that's great. And but yeah, I know Sarah. I live in Kensington right now,
Mm.
and I think she might be living in this area as well. So I do see her around.
Mm.
But it's a formidable opponent, and but I'm glad to hear that you're getting started early,
Mm.
and that's the smart thing. So
Well, one thing I'll say is I've only known you now for 18 minutes, and I would say you would make a phenomenal representative of Congress. And I
oh,
hope you run
appreciate it.
again. I hope you run again at some point,
Yeah,
and
I
I will
appreciate it.
100% back you because I can just tell. I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I would say like I feel like you have a lot of the characteristics of what we need in Congress these
Oh,
days.
well, I appreciate that. Well, I'm not, I have no intentions to do that for Congress, but City Council might be on my list in a couple years, and I'm gonna leave you running I'll have you running for Congress this time.
But you touched on
um,
something that I wanted to touch on real quick, and
yeah.
just the kind of the political machine that is the money of a
Hmm.
campaign, and that's actually a big part of why I decided to run. When I was taking my master's courses in public administration, I remember taking this course, and we got all the way through. It was telling us, how to run a campaign, all the everything. I mean, the nuts and the bolts, everything. And what bothered me was we got to the end, and they said, you can have all of this done correctly. You can have the most efficient campaign. You can have the best slogan. You have the best logo. You can have the best everything, the best candidate. But if you don't have the money, you're done before you start.
Yeah.
And that really rubbed me the wrong way because I thought, okay, objectively, is this correct? Is this morally correct? that we've
Right.
gotten to a place in our politics where even if you check all the boxes, like you could be a phenomenal candidate, but you don't have money, that you are going to fail in this campaign. And I thought that can't be right. That's not what the
Mhm.
values of being American are all about.
Right.
The value of being American, as we just talked about with my family history, and even you running, is
Mhm.
that you can come from any background you could possibly imagine, and you can actually attain one of these offices
Yeah.
of in Congress or president even, or
Mhm.
we've had a peanut farmer. We've had a actor. We've
Yeah.
had now a talk show host.
Right.
you know,
Right.
we've had so many different presidents. From different backgrounds, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. And I feel like we need to get back to that kind of representation of people who know what it's like to be us,
Right.
people who know what it's like to actually live these struggles that we're going through. Because for example, there's things that have happened in your life that influence the way that you make decisions now. I
Mhm.
think I would be
Yeah.
correct in saying that,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So for the background that we go through, being working class, that's going to influence the way that eventually, I legislate and form
Mhm.
policy and interact with people. And that's going to have a direct impact on the constituents. And I feel
Mhm.
like if you look at politicians these days, the way that they legislate and the way that they form policy is from this place of being so out of touch. And
Yeah.
you could see it in the poll results. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running. And I know, look, if I told you how much money was in my bank account right now, we'd both be embarrassed. Okay.
Hey, I've been
And
there, man. Don't even worry
yeah,
about it. I've been there.
yeah, the struggle is so real right now.
Right.
Okay. I
Yep.
make $18 an hour working at the airport. I
Yep.
bust my butt. I'm working 80 hours.
Wow.
I,
Yeah.
I'm doing everything I can to support my family. I had to work my way through college. I had to work my way through my master's program. I know what it's like because I've actually lived it. And,
Right.
I don't have a lot of money, and I don't have all this money to go into campaign. And actually, that's one of the reasons why, I don't know if you saw, but that's why I'm actually running a campaign without change. So
Yeah.
I'm not actually taking any donations from my constituents. I'm
Oh
not
wow.
taking any contributions, and I have
Yeah.
no intention to. And part of the reason is because I want to bring that focus back to the candidate. And if I'm going to lose this race, I'm okay with that. It's not the end of the
Yeah.
world, but I'm going to lose it on my own merit because
Right.
I wasn't a good candidate and people didn't want me to represent them. But
Yeah.
I refuse to lose because I didn't raise enough money or
Mhm.
or make that the focus of my campaign. And a lot of people have called me crazy. They've laughed. The range of responses is exactly what you're thinking right now. And but I just felt, okay, well, if I already am behind the ball, her being a big name and being
Mhm.
rich, I can't beat her on her own turf. I
Right.
don't have that money. I don't have that backing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick to what I know, and that's myself, that's my constituents, that's my city,
Yeah.
and I'm going to run based off of that. And if I lose, it's going to be based off of that. It's not going to be on how much I raise. And the
Yeah.
second part of that is not taking any contributions, is no one owns me.
Right.
And my grandma had a very good saying, and she said, "Nothing's free but Jesus and water." Um, you know,
Yeah.
everything comes with a tag. Everything comes with a hook.
Mhm.
When people, and I'm not talking about constituents, the $5, $10.
Right.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the big donors.
Right.
When they give that money, it's either said or it's unsaid. That's coming with something.
Right.
Hey, think about me when you're making this. Like, think about me when you're doing this. And that's what we see in politics. It's
Mhm.
become this lobbying game of these big corporations buying these politicians, and then they make legislation and people are surprised, like, oh, why are they so out of touch, why are they doing this? It's because
Yeah.
they're bought.
Right.
And the thing is like, I've had to deal with this my whole life, and you know what, no one owns me, and no one's going to
Mhm.
own this campaign, and no
Yeah.
one's going to own my decisions when I'm in Congress and legislating for the people. And that's why I'm not going to take any money. So if I'm going to lose, I'm totally okay with that. That's
Yeah.
okay. I'll
Yeah.
move on, I'll be all right. But like, I'm not going to win because I got $2 million in campaign contributions, and now in the back of my mind when I legislate, I got to think about, oh, okay, no, let me help them out because they helped me out. The only thing I want to be in my mind is my constituents
Yeah.
and what is for the greater good, even those constituents who didn't vote for me, because that's the thing that people forget. You got the people that vote for you, okay, well and good, you won, but you got to be a leader for everybody. You got to
Yep.
be a leader for those people who didn't vote for you. You got to look out for their greater good, even though they don't like you. They may hate you, they may protest you, and you
Yeah.
still got to step up to the plate and lead them as well for their good. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's missing these days is,
Mm,
when I see in the Democratic Party, you talk about why am I Republican? When I look at their platform and I look at Sarah Jacobs just objectively,
yeah.
if you look at all her posts, it's just like Trump, Elon, Trump, Elon, Trump, Elon, Trump,
Right.
Elon, Trump, Elon. And it's like, okay, I get it. You don't agree with them. You don't like them. You think they're the bane of all the problems in the world. Okay, that's fine. But do you realize that you're not just legislating, you're not just leading for those people who voted for you, who agree with you, who don't like them? There's people who maybe support some of the things they do and just not the way they're being carried out,
Yeah.
that you need to be a leader for. And I don't want to say just her. I'm not going to single her out. In the greater political scheme, this is what I see happening.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, that's great. And I've I personally, all the things when you tell people you're running and they look at you like you're crazy,
Yeah.
I've received myself. But, for me, people would always ask me, like, why are you running? And, it's a very hard question that the answer to, but it's
Right.
always, sometimes it's so deeply rooted, it can be hard to explain. It's
Right.
almost like I don't want to run. It's like I have to run.
Yes.
There's something inside of me that
Yes.
feels like I have to do this. And I'm doing it this way because, the way that you just explained it, I'm sick and tired of, people with money running this country. That's not what it was
Mm,
intended to be about. It was never intended.
mm,
And it's actually the root of many of the problems we have today is that, like you said, it's a people with tons of money. And I'm gonna
mm,
segue this into an issue, but
mm,
corporations and individuals who are really controlling this country, not
mm,
people like me and you, citizens
mm,
of this nation. What are your thoughts on campaign finance reform? Getting rid of corporate, maybe corporations being able to, with Citizens United, where we basically look at corporations as people, and they're able to donate almost literally as much money as they want to PACs, to political action committees. Are you somebody who would like to reform that and maybe full on get rid of it or make some changes to it to where at the very least people have to identify themselves so that way we know where the money's come from? I know that there's a lot of talk of because the reality is a lot of foreign entities are investing into corporations and then using those corporations to invest in political parties and political candidates. And so they're indirectly influencing our elections
mm,
in that way. And nobody's really
mm.
talking about that. We put limits on how an individual can contribute. Like me and you can only contribute to a candidate so much.
Right.
And we
Right.
have to disclose that. And not
Right.
only that, you have to be a US citizen
Yep.
to actually make that contribution. Whereas
Mm.
a corporation who has money coming in from foreign entities, they don't have to do that. And so do you have any thoughts about maybe reforming that or changing that, or are you at least up for that conversation?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm going to say this. I know you said your aspirations are to city council, but I'm going to say it right now. Fernando Garcia for mayor.
Well, thank you. I
You have my
appreciate that.
you have my vote. But you asked, what are my thoughts on it? And you know what my thoughts are? I I played. Do you like baseball? Are
I
you a
do.
fan of baseball?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And I'm going to
Yeah.
bring
Yeah.
up one
Okay.
after you're done. I'm going to bring up another one when you're done. A
Okay.
baseball
Okay. Good.
analogy.
Okay. Well. Okay. Well, in baseball, one of my favorite sounds is just when the hitter gets a pure hit and just
Mm,
crushes the ball.
yeah.
It's just like that home run, and you just immediately know it's gone. That's what I think we need to do to campaign, like campaign finance reform.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly what we need to do. We need to
Yeah.
let's completely just hit the bat on the ball and hit it out of the park and just go for it. Because what it's become is poisoned our politics.
Hmm.
It's become something that I believe has taken away from the foundations of our actual, constitutional republic. It's
Yeah.
completely just poisoned it. And I think we just need to take a bat to it. To be
Yeah.
plain and simple, we need to take a bat to it. And normally, I'm a type of person where like, hey, sometimes you need to go about things delicately. You need to go about like a surgeon
Hmm.
rather than a bull in a china shop.
Right.
But there are some things I feel that have become so toxic that we just need to we need to destroy. It's just
Yeah.
like when you're in construction. Um, there's some things I need to do on this house. We're trying
Right.
to revamp, and there's like a gate that is concrete and it's fallen off, and we just talk about, okay, can we lift it up? Can
Yeah.
we put all these things? And we just came to the realization, no, we just need to take a sledgehammer to it. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's what has happened in our politics these days is, and people don't realize it, but the George Soroses and all these corporations and people that can donate just millions and billions of dollars. In the last campaign alone, I think the last time I checked, I could be wrong, so somebody can fact check me, go for it.
Sure.
But I believe the Democratic campaign spent almost $2 billion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
$2 billion, and they lost.
Right.
That's insane. And we got here now, the governor asking for loans for for Medicare. We got him saying that he's spending $50 million to Trump proof. Okay.
Right.
We got all these politicians legislating and we need money for this. We need money for this. And to me, I look at it like, okay, well, where is the money actually going?
Right. Yeah.
And when you look at these campaigns and all these people who have a hand in it and are able to donate money, and they don't have limits seemingly, but we got limits.
Right.
And then you look at some of these policies and you say, oh, well, that's just a coincidence. Like, really? You're kidding me, right? You're saying that the biggest donor was somebody who was in this technological field, and then there is a bill presented about deregulation or something like that,
Right.
and you're going to tell me that's just a coincidence,
Right.
And I feel like we need it now, and we need it extensively, and I feel like at this point we need to just completely level it to the foundations. And we need to come to a point where, this is bipartisan. This is across the field where we're saying, okay, how are we going to do this going forward? I think that there needs to be limits on everybody, period. And there needs to be limits on corporations mainly, because I don't agree with that. Corporations are not people.
Right.
And I don't believe that has anything to do with freedom of speech. They could say, oh, well, it's freedom of speech to this. Okay, well, the goal of freedom of speech is what? Is so that you're able to freely express your opinion in a way that doesn't kind of, cajole somebody into making a decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at these like donations, what are they doing? Is they're actually influencing actual policy and our politicians and our government, which is affecting constituents and the working class like me and you, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if it's come to that point, then we need to change something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and my baseball analogy, I don't know, have you ever seen Moneyball?
Oh, I love that movie.
So one of my favorite scenes is where Brad Pitt is in there and he's telling the guys, hey, if we play like the Yankees in here, we're going to lose we're going to lose to the Yankees out there. And that's how the campaign needs to be run. If you try to run the way that Sarah Jacobs is running, you're going to lose.
I'm going to lose.
So it's kind of like the Moneyball. We got to figure out a new way to do things so that we can win out there, because we definitely can't do it the old way.
Essentially, my campaign is, and I'm not trying to say this, like I'm trying to say this with as much humility as I can say, but like my campaign is I want to rewrite the book on how to run a campaign for Congress. I want to rewrite all these rules and all these, because those rules in baseball that they say is unwritten, like, oh, don't swing for the fences if you're already up and all.
Yeah.
And we all know that that's a load of what, okay?
Right. Yeah.
That is just stupid rules that somebody has made for somebody's feelings. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like there's so many of these unwritten rules in politics, and I want to rewrite most of them, and I want to take a bat to some of the other ones. Right. And I'm going to do things my way. I'm going to do things the way that I feel is best for my community and for my city. I don't really care what these political rules are. Oh, you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do this. Oh, you got to take this, you got to do this. I don't really care. Yeah. I'm not going to run based off of that. And so that's what my campaign is about, is I know that I'm going to be this kind of, Robin Hood of campaigns where everyone's like, oh, they're going to have their opinion, but I'm doing it for, I would say my people, but my people, I'm not talking about, Black or Hispanic. I'm talking about my people, like the city of San Diego. Like that's my people, that's who I consider. And I feel like no one's looked out for them for a long time. We just get politicians coming every 4 years and making promises and like, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And, like if you look at her page, she doesn't stray from the book. Oh my goodness. She does not stray from the political book. like showing up at businesses, give the
Right.
thumbs up, smile. I'm
Yeah.
meeting with small businesses, and it's like great. I'm not saying that's not genuine. I don't want to
Mhm.
say that, but you're just doing this. I see the same thing, and I won't even pick on her. I'll go to Republican candidate. If you
Yeah.
look at a Republican candidate, who has the backing of the super PACs and everything, they do the same thing. They
Right.
do the same exact thing, and I feel like it needs to stop.
Yeah.
We need to rewrite the book at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what one thing too, I know you're going to get asked, especially in District 51, is being a Republican, they're going to tie you obviously to Trump, and you're going to get asked a lot of questions. What are your feelings on Trump? What are your feelings on how he's doing? How do you how would you respond to that if I said,
Yeah.
if somebody came, what are your thoughts on Trump?
I mean, the truth is, this is something I've been dealing with my whole life.
Hmm.
Is like we talked about, people trying to put me in a box. So this is something I've been prepared for, and
Yeah.
it doesn't really surprise me, and it doesn't even really make me angry because that's their right to know. It's
Hmm.
their right to know. If they have a question, how do you feel about Trump? But what I would say more specifically is like, what do you mean by that question? That's what I want to ask.
Yeah.
Because if you mean by that to determine whether you vote for me or not, I would encourage you to ask further questions.
Yeah.
If you mean by that to kind of dig deeper into my policies, then I would encourage you to ask about those policy related questions. If you mean by that to ask me about his personal character, then I'll give you an honest answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but you know what I'm saying? I want to dig deeper and to see what is the heart of that. Because if your purpose is just to say, okay, do you support Trump? And I just gave you a flat out answer. This is not my cohesive answer. If I just said yes, then you say, okay, well, I'm not voting for you. I'm not
Right.
voting for you. I'm not voting for a Republican. Then I would say, okay, well, this conversation is over. You
Right.
accomplished what you wanted. But
Yeah.
if you want to go a little bit deeper and you want to see how the policy that I have in mind and the vision I have in mind is going to actually affect the constituents, then maybe ask a follow-up question like, hey, Trump supports X, Y, and Z. How do you feel about this? I
Right.
see Trump doing X, Y, and Z. How do you feel about this? I'm upset because Trump has done this. What are your thoughts on this? Those
Yeah.
questions to me I appreciate those so much, even if we disagree and I don't have the answer that you like, is
Yeah.
because you're asking a follow up question rather than we all know what that means. Okay, let's be honest. We know what that means. If someone comes up to me and says, do you support Trump? Because their next question is not going to be about immigration policy or all these things. Their next question is to be like, I've already decided in my mind whether I'm going to support you or not. And I feel like that's wrong.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you a question, Fernando.
Sure.
If
Yeah.
if I was walking down the street and and you saw me, would you?
Hmm.
And I already know the answer to this because I don't think you're this kind of guy. But
Yeah.
would you make a judgment call on me based on my skin color?
No, I wouldn't. No. No.
No, I absolutely don't think
No.
you're even
No. Yeah.
remotely that kind of guy.
No. No.
But these days, we've made it so comfortable to make these blanket judgments based off a party. And I'll
Yeah.
be honest with you, I've done it in the past because of Democrats too. And I'm not
Mhm.
perfect, okay? And we
Yeah.
all do it. But I just feel like we need to peel that back a little bit and find what are these underlying fears and motives and get to the heart of those versus making these just judgment calls because we lose out on a potentially there's a lot of good candidates out there who will really do good for our communities, but since we just paint them with the same brush and put them in this box, we lose out on that.
Right.
And I feel like that's what's happening, and that's why I'm running. And and if you want to know like my thoughts on Trump, there's a lot of things I've told my friend, and we are both Republicans. I
Yeah.
said, Trump's biggest downfall, and we both agreed, is his mouth. You know,
Right.
sometimes he really struggles to just control the rhetoric, and
Right.
that's on both sides. I've seen rhetoric on the Democratic side and Republican side, but sometimes I just feel like, hey, I get what you're doing, and I'm actually on board with a lot of this. Just tamp down the rhetoric a little bit,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
You know, cool it down a little bit. So there's some things where I don't agree with the way that he goes about certain things, but fundamentally, like a lot of things he's doing, like I think is well needed, and it needs to be accomplished just for the sake of our city, for our institutions and things like that. Um, it's just sometimes, like I said, his mouth gets him in a little bit of trouble. Well, I mean,
Right.
like all of us, like me
Right.
too.
So let me.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say I was going to get into some of these specific issues. So
Okay.
and some of the big talk right now is with Doge and Elon. I mean,
Right.
do you think that they're is that something that you support? Is it something like, hey, I support it, but I think they're kind of maybe going about it the wrong way? I mean, what are your thoughts on what's going on right now with Elon and Doge?
Now I'm going to take off my candidate hat and I'm going to put on my public administrator hat because I have a
Okay.
lot of opinions about this being a public administrator. And for
Yeah.
those who don't know, public administration is just essentially, when we have policy and then that policy is applied to various administrations,
Mhm.
there's a way that gets applied, and it's very important to the state of our democracy.
Right.
For example, immigration policy. All we see in policy is the person signing the bill and smiles and thumbs up.
Right.
No one sees the nuts and bolts of the administrative side where this gets applied, and that's very important. And I mean, that could be the difference between a good policy and a bad policy. And so when I look at Doge, like the fundamental nature of it, of wanting to root out inefficient and, often illegal spending and these things,
Yeah.
fundamentally, I agree with that because I think there is a big bureaucratic system that is completely inflated and it's just bloated and it's just corrupt. And I think that we need to take a second look at that. However, in this instance, when it comes to specifically this way of spending and looking at things, I would not take a sledgehammer. I would take more of a surgeon's scalpel
Right.
because there are certain things that are just constitutional and you can't circumnavigate Congress. Okay.
Right.
When we circumnavigate points of our government, you essentially are rewriting the Constitution. And that's fundamentally, I can't get behind that. Okay.
Yeah.
And Congress has the power of the purse. Okay. Congress has the power to make legislation. And I believe those things should remain with Congress.
Yeah.
Now, but I also agree with the spirit of what they're doing. I just think that they need to go about it in more, how do you say, conjunction with Congress.
Yeah.
I think that it needs to be more bipartisan in nature. It needs to be working together to come up with these solutions.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, like, I could tell you just examples. Even my dad remarried to a Ugandan woman.
Okay.
And she was telling me that when she was living in Uganda, she was working for an NGO, TASO, that actually, it's an AIDS organization that actually received direct funding from USAID. And she said the budget of TASO in Uganda was bigger than the entire health budget for the country.
Wow.
And she said what it did was it drew this corruption, and these corrupt politicians come in and take their piece of it. And by the time it got down to these actual people who need it, there was nothing left. She said the problem wasn't money, because Sarah Jacobs has gone on there and said, if you cut USAID, babies will die, terrorists will win, and just these emotional appeals.
Right.
But when you got down to it at these administrative level, like, actually, it wasn't the problem of having money, it was the problem of oversight. And that's a big thing that Doge is looking at, is this oversight. A lot of these organizations don't have oversight. Think about it. If I were right now to question an NGO, and I'm not going to go there on this show because I don't want to do that to you, of an NGO that people have interest in, okay? People would come for me so fast. Be like, that's an NGO, that's helping the people, right? People's feelings get involved. And I'm not coming for that. I'm just saying, like, they don't get a blank check just because you say you're an NGO. There's still proper oversight. I've done a lot of case studies on NGO as a public administrator where it's an NGO, but it's run inefficiently and ineffectively, and they have essentially become insolvent at some point.
Right.
So you can't just write them a blank check just because they're an NGO. There has to be oversight. There has to be responsibility. There has to be, if you're giving money, for example, if you were to give me money because I said I couldn't feed my family, right? Then you need to say, okay, Johnny, we're buddies, but I'm not just going to dump $100 in your bank account. Can I get you a gift card to Food for Less? Can I get you a gift card to Vaughn's? And I'd say, heck yeah, you can. I'll take that. And if I'm really hungry and my family's really hungry, I'm going to accept that. But if I'm kind of like, hey man, can you just wire me the money? And that to me is like, you're not allowing that oversight, and that leads to more questions, in my opinion.
Correct. Got it. Well, and what are your thoughts? And I'm asking questions that you're probably going to face in Congress.
Right.
In terms of foreign affairs, the two probably big ones are what's going on in Ukraine, and then also what's going on in Israel and Palestine. we'll start with Ukraine right now. Do you have any specific thoughts about Ukraine and how we're handling and how we should handle it?
I have a lot of thoughts on Ukraine.
Okay.
I don't know where you want to begin, but let me just begin with the kind of the surface level. We've sent almost over like now, I think it's like we're at like $175 billion to Ukraine.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that's not warranted because we did make certain promises and these things. But one of the things about that just bothers me is because at this same time we were still struggling post COVID.
Yeah.
We're still struggling with record inflation. We're still struggling with record cost of living. We're still struggling with all these things in my district specifically. And it would be like this, Fernando. If you saw me giving $100 to a homeless person, and you'd be like, "Dang, Johnny's really generous. He has a good
Yeah.
heart." And then you looked over, and my wife and kids were begging on the street for food.
Yeah.
What would you say? You would say, "I got my priorities mixed up," right?
Right.
And you wouldn't say that I'm a bad person for giving that money. You would just say, "Hey, man,
Yeah.
maybe take care of your family first, and if you have something left over, you could be generous." And I
Yeah.
feel like for on the bigger scale, we've done that too much. We've overextended ourselves as America because we're the big superpower. We've overextended ourselves across the world, and we have taken the focus off our own citizens. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that we shouldn't help the rest of the world. I'm not saying that we have a responsibility to because we are a global superpower. I'm just saying that we've kind of lost sight of our own citizens.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main reasons why I'm running. So,
Yeah.
specifically, you talked about Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
I feel that's first and foremost, we need to take a harder look at that on what is necessary and how much we want to actually involve ourselves. That's number one.
Right.
Number two, there are more historical things that are played that people don't realize. And that is, when they had the breakdown of the Soviet Union, I believe, like the Crimea
Hmm.
actually had that was its own actually country. That
Hmm.
was actually its own like sovereign country. And I believe the agreement, I forgot what it's called. It's the Bolsa. I can't remember the name right now. Correct me if you know it or you're
I
wrong.
don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that. Yeah.
Okay,
But
okay, but there essentially what it was is if Ukraine, if that portion of Ukraine is no longer able to govern himself. That was the agreement. That portion of Ukraine is no longer able to govern itself, then it would essentially be restored to Russia, to what was Russia nowadays.
yeah.
And so that was the big thing. And that's why when you go into like that area, like it's pretty contested. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you look at the people, like it's pretty diverse because that was the agreement at first. And so when, Russia goes in there and says, tries to annex it, and says, okay, this is I would say like technically, like that's what was agreed upon. Do I think that is morally correct? No, I don't believe that is, something that is morally correct to go in there, with tanks and with guns and to just say, hey, this is mine now. This needs to be done in a more diplomatic way.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying is instead of people just going off of the media and saying, oh, Ukraine, because it's so fun to, everyone
Yeah.
puts their flag up and says Ukraine, maybe take a closer look at the historical nature of it because there's a lot more at play there than what you think is going on.
Yeah.
And it's not as black and white as you think. And I'm not saying this as I'm a Russian supporter. Somebody says, "Oh, you're Putin. You're a Putin lover, or you're a Zelensky lover." I'm an American lover. Okay.
Right. Right.
And I want to do what's best for the American people. And if we're overextending ourselves in a place where we shouldn't be overextended, then I think we need to take a closer look at that. And I think at this point, I think we have overextended ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that at this point, people got really mad at, about Zelensky being in the White House and, oh, that was so rude and all these things. But
Yeah.
like, I almost think like what he did in some senses was a little bit rude. If you gave me money, we just talked about, and then I just came in your house, a month later, just expecting more and just saying, hey, let's just get down business and just
Yeah.
give me this. Like, that's a little rude, even if you were going to do that. And I
Right.
feel like there has been this expectation on their part, like that, okay, we need to keep funding unlimited. Anytime I ask for money from Congress, you need to give it out. He's essentially using the ATM, I feel like US like an ATM.
Right.
And I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think right now, like, what I would do is I would take a closer look at the situation, the geopolitical situation, and not just like, everyone's feelings, historically look at it, look at how we've invested, Where do we want to be in 5 years? Because that needs to have a goal as well. We can't just keep saying, oh, we're going to give money to give money. What is the end game for this?
Right.
What is the end goal? When are we going to stop? Okay. What do you want? Okay. Because if we don't give an end goal, this is going to be another Iraq. And that's
Right.
what happened in Iraq. We never set an end goal. We never set an end game. We just kept dumping money and dumping money and dumping money and losing American lives for 10 years when we
Right.
found out there was no weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
And you know what I found out? I actually did a case study on this too. We found out that I forgot it was like a CIA agent inside who actually ended up talking to like the people in Saddam's circle. And they
Mhm.
said the reason why they kept not saying that there wasn't weapons of mass destruction, they didn't want to seem weak. They
Right.
didn't want, they would lose their hand if they said, oh, we didn't have this, you know?
Right.
And so, like, I feel like it's kind of like a slap in the face. Oh, wow, we should have actually taken a closer look at that. And I don't want to have that happen with Ukraine.
Right.
I don't want to get into another 10-year war. We can't afford that. The American people can't afford that.
Yeah. How about what about your thoughts on Israel and what's going on in Palestine and all that?
Okay. Here's another one too. and I have some feelings on this too, because being
Yeah.
a Christian. But I'll put that aside. You know, first off, I will say to anybody watching this or anybody who's part of this, please, instead of just jumping to the platitudes of Zionists and Gaza, Hamas, just take those off for a second and just look at this for what it is. Because what I mean by that is because when we start talking about this, people, the first thing I think people gravitate towards is wanting to put a label on something.
Mhm.
Oh, you're a Zionist, you're this, you're X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, let's just look at it for what it is. These two governments have been at war with each other just constantly
Mhm.
for the better part of a century. And if you want to go back even biblically, it's thousands of years.
Right.
That this has been going on. So it's not as cut and dry as you think. Number two, I think that a lot of the atrocities, what people are getting inflamed about in Palestine are actually, justified. Like there's a lot of things that Israel is doing to protect its sovereignty, but they're kind of stretching those boundaries and saying, hey, we need to protect our own. It's kind of like if I pushed my little girl into somebody and I said, you did her,
Right.
and I go off on them. I'm not allowed under law to overextend myself beyond what is the protection for my daughter. And in much the same way, I feel like in some instances, Israel has done itself a disservice in the way that they have gone about that. Now, on the other hand, when we look at the attacks like on Israel by Hamas that day, I absolutely think, okay, I am the leader over Israel, and somebody did that. That 100% to me would have been an act of war. And
Yeah.
I would have gone to our legislative body. I'm like, we are at war. Cut and dry, plain and simple. That was a direct invasion. You can
Mhm.
say for whatever reason that it was justified, and I don't agree with you. You can
Mhm.
say for whatever reason it was justified. I'm just saying that was an invasion. Okay, that was a direct attack on the Israeli people, and that was unjustified. And the slaughter of the POWs, and I'm not talking about hearsay. I've seen some of that video that
Yeah.
has really turned my stomach. And I think that was just completely unacceptable. And all the afterwards, when Israel responded, I believe that was justified. But to an extent, I believe that there needs to be always an end game and always a plan and always an upfront transparentness with these things. Like, hey, for example, I am attacking X, Y, and Z facility because it funded the weapons that attacked us, and this is my direct response to that. Okay, this place we have intelligence on, direct intelligence is funding, the bomb making, blah blah blah, that has the same bombs that attacked us. You see what I'm saying? It
Yeah.
needs to be clear, it needs to be strategical, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be in line with, the rules of war and engagement and these things.
Yeah.
Uh, because I think just because you're defending yourself doesn't give you the right to, overextend yourself in that way.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my feelings on it. I know it sounds like I'm trying to take intentionally the middle road. I'm actually not. This is just my feeling on it because
Yeah.
I feel that both sides have done themselves a disservice, even when they feel like they have been justified.
Yeah. Now, another hot issue too that's here in San Diego is immigration, in the
Right.
country in general. What are your thoughts on how we handle immigration right now? Trump's kind of rhetoric and stance on immigration, primarily illegal immigration. How do you feel about that?
Well, first off, I feel some type of way because I come from a family of immigrants.
Hmm.
I just told you my grandfather was in the belly of his mom, when he came over here.
Yeah.
But I have those border crossing documents where they came over here.
Right.
They came over here legally. They went through that process. Now you want to fast forward now. My wife is South African. I don't know if I mentioned that, but my
Uh,
wife is South African.
okay.
Um, we met in South Korea. So we got married there, and it wasn't even a thought actually until we decided we are going to move here.
Yeah.
Oh, we need to go through that immigration process. And let me
Yeah.
tell you, the headache that is. Matter of fact, no, I do have that paperwork. So I'm at my desk. Hold on a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me show you
Okay.
how
Yeah.
much.
No,
Hold
perfect.
on.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. Where is it? Okay. This
Yeah.
is the documents that I had to go through. And this is actually one folder. So this is 1/4 of the first part, just proving our relationship.
Yeah.
This is not the green card process. This is
Yeah.
just proving our relationship. And I have 4 more folders doing that. When I
Wow.
finished doing that after, a year or so, I had another stack of paperwork this high just to go through the green card process. And I mean, the questions they asked were so detailed. They asked about her elementary school. They wanted her to know her elementary school address. They want to know if any point in her life, if she talked to a terrorist. Did she know a
Wow.
terrorist? Did she inadvertently take something from a terrorist? And I wish I would have screenshotted it. I might be able to go back on our account and look up some of these questions. But these are actual questions that she was asked.
Wow.
And even when we arrived on here, they asked even more in detail questions. And so my feeling is, why is it that my wife, and by the way, I didn't mention, she's an absolute saint. She
Right.
comes from a good family. She's
Yeah.
never even had a speeding ticket. She
Yeah.
says sorry if she accidentally bumps into you.
Yeah.
She is the type of people we want coming in this country. But
Right.
why is it that she has to go through this? And I'm not saying it's not justified,
Yeah.
but that we are making it so taboo that I can't ask questions. Excuse me, I can't ask questions of somebody coming here illegally. Hey, where are you from? I can't ask these same questions to ensure
Mhm.
that we're not letting somebody who's going to do harm to American citizens through these
Yeah.
borders. And if I
Yeah.
ask that, I'm a racist. I'm
Right.
I'm xenophobic, and I'm not. I just don't want 2 tiers of this immigration system. It's not fair. Why
Yeah.
is it that as an American citizen, I have to go through this with my wife in one tier, but that somebody who is not an American citizen and coming here illegally doesn't? I work at the airport, and I can't say too much about the procedures because I don't want to get in
Yeah.
trouble and get fired.
Right.
I'm still broke. I need a job. But I will just say that before Trump took office, at least two dozen times a day, certain group of people would come up there to check in, and they didn't have ID. They had a packet of release, and I was supposed to just let them through. And when I looked at it, you had to verify their name. They don't have to have ID. I just
Mhm.
verify their name, and it's a plane ticket to somewhere in the United States. Now, I will say that I have looked on the first page because that's a part of my verification,
Yeah.
and it says the place where their case is going to be adjudicated. Now, if I told you the percentage of times where the place where their case is going to be adjudicated and where they're going is the same, I would say it's not very often.
Wow.
And so, and also the time period is often just astronomical. One time I saw it was like 9 years.
Oh, wow.
9 years.
Yeah.
So you have this person, and you think in 9 years they're going to come back and say, okay, let me go back to LA and stand before a judge. They very well. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They
Right.
will. But I'm just saying is more than off, they're going to get lost in the system. They're going to get absolutely lost in the system. And so I just feel that's not fair. We are creating two systems of government, one for citizens and one for people who are not even citizens.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, I'm not talking about asylum, because asylum, by the rules of asylum, and people will say this, oh, they're claiming asylum, they're claiming asylum. Yes, you can claim asylum when you come through a legal port of entry. You
Right.
must come through a legal port of entry. You cannot climb under or over a fence and then claim asylum. Well, you can, but according to the rules of immigration, you must come through a legal port of entry. And
Yeah.
I'm just saying, hey, you know what? On the other side of the fence, let me go to the other side, is maybe people are so desperate and they feel so beleaguered by our immigration system that it's not efficient enough for them to want to do it the right way. And that's a fault on our administrative part. Now, as a public administrator, that's something we need to fix, because if it's not efficient, that it's not encouraging people to do the right thing, then that's also wrong,
Right.
because essentially you're encouraging people like, okay, well, if I was a dad and you gave me that choice, like, forget you, I'm gonna
Right.
come here one way or another, because
Right.
it's for my family, and I understand that sentiment. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot there as well. That we need immigration reform, and we need it badly,
Right.
because that little app that Biden had wasn't working. And I can tell you, front lines, I was on the front lines of seeing those people who were going through that process, and I talked to some of them. That app wasn't working.
Yeah.
The whole catch and release thing wasn't working. And you got people just streaming in here, and some of them, I'm telling you, even like Lake and Riley, it's people who did harm to our citizens, and I think that's unfair. That's not only unfair, it's something I take personal, because coming from a family of immigrants who came here legally, and also my wife who had to come here legally, you asked her if she was a terrorist, but you're just gonna catch and release somebody who you didn't even give a background check or proper verification. So a lot of what he's doing now, I appreciate him stopping this flood of immigrants at the border and overwhelming our system. We're already struggling with cost of living. We're already struggling with inflation. When you add this more, I'm not saying I'm not a NIMBY, not in my backyard. I'm just saying is we have to take care of our citizens first. We absolutely should have compassion. I don't believe if I see a immigrant couple on the street with they're begging with their family, that we should just disrespect them and say, okay, grab them, throw them out, like, hey, okay, if you're not here legally, we have to process you. But while you're doing that, we can give you respect, we can give you help, we can show you the proper channels. I believe that if they're already here and they're being a good citizen, paying their taxes, they're not a criminal. I believe, hey, you know what? You broke the law. We can't change that law. You should pay a penalty, but you should be offered a path forward.
Right.
If you're an upstanding citizen, okay.
Right.
If you're going to contribute constructively to this country, and that's the strength of our country and our history, then you should be allowed a path forward. But you still have to face the consequences.
Right.
You still have to face some consequence, or else it's not a law. There's not a single country in the world that you can name that allows people who are illegal to come in, and then there's no consequences.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
Now, John, before I let you go here, I wanted to go over we could talk for hours about every single issue, but I kind of wanted to hit on some of the top ones.
Yeah.
If you had to give a real quick speech on why the people in District 51 should vote for you, and I'm gonna leave in the link your website and everything, so they can contact you and learn more on their own. But what is your final plea? What is your plea to people why they should vote for you and put you in Congress?
Well, let me start with this. Give me 1 second here.
No problem.
When I was younger and I had a better sharp memory, I memorized it. But I did it. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America. During 1775 through 1783, 70,000 patriots, 70,000 American patriots died to free Americans from the tyrannical rule of King George of England. These were mostly farmers, just kind of standing defiantly in the face of this big empire, all right? These were people who would not go down without a fight. This is our history. And you know what? I feel that we do a disservice to them to not protect this, what they died for. And I think we do a disservice to them when we play these red and blue games, Republican and Democrat, because at that time, you think that those farmers and those militiamen, they didn't look to each other and say, hey, what's your personal thought on this immigration? No, all of them said, hey, brother, take up your arms and let's go to war, because this is our country that we're fighting for. And I feel like we need to get back to that. And like, I know that I'm running as a Republican, and people say, oh, that's easy for you to say you're running as a Republican. That's true. But I would say, like, at my heart, I'm an American. That's what identifies me before anything, is I'm just proud to be an American. And I feel like this was established with sacrifice. My grandfather fought wars to establish this and protect this. I can tell you stories of my other grandfather, my Mexican grandfather, was actually a POW in Korea.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
he fought to establish that. Sorry, my phone rang.
It's all right.
He
It's
fought
all right.
to establish this and protect this. And so I just feel like there's all this sacrifice that has gone into this, and people don't even know the half of it. If you go through our history, everything from the American Revolution to every single war that we've been in, and I feel like we have gotten away from that unity, that one
Yeah.
thing that unites us, and we've made all these things that divides us, these main points of our personality. And I'm just saying we can disagree on many things, and that's okay. But let's agree on one thing. We're all Americans and we all desire the greater good. And I believe that there's Democrats who, they say all these things about Trump. I believe at their core, they just want the greater good for their constituency, for their communities, for their citizens, and for their city. And that's what I want too. Okay. I don't want anything different. I want to have politicians in office who are not out of touch, who are not these out of touch politicians who don't know what it's like to be us. I want to restore the working class voice of those Americans who fought and died for our country back to the halls of Congress, because I think what it's become is these out of touch politicians who have other motives and who have their pockets full, and their mind is not thinking about their constituency. Their mind is thinking about their bank account. And I feel like the working class vote has been lost in Congress. And that's why I'm running. I'm running to restore that. I'm running because the sacrifice of the people in my family, I feel was too great to just sit down and just say, okay, I'm not going to run because I'm scared. I don't have money. I don't have X, Y, and Z. I felt a responsibility to run. And it wasn't just because, oh, I want this power or this thing. I just felt like when I looked at politicians and the way they talk and the way they legislate, they were not representing those struggles that we all go through. And I felt when I looked across the board that the working class voice was lost in Congress. And I felt like it needed to be restored. We need to get back to our constitutional foundations. We need to get back to our constitutional unity as American. We need to get back to political integrity, and we need to come together and find creative solutions so that way we can find a way to relieve this cost of living that is just burdening families, and it's just crushing us. And we can focus on all these cultural issues, and we can go and talk about these things. You can ask me about gay marriage. You can ask me about immigration. You can ask me about all these things, and I'll give you an answer. And that's fine if you want to base your vote for me off that. But at the heart of it, I just want to do what's best for my city. I just want to do what's best for my family. And I want to honor the sacrifice of those American patriots who died to establish this.
Yeah. Well, John, that's a great answer. My hat's off to you for putting yourself out there. I know how it is. Keep fighting. For those listening, you're going to be able to go to his website on my link here. I'll put all his information on there. And John, thank you so much for coming on my show. I wish you the best. And I think I believe you have a bright future.
I appreciate you. And thank you so much for having me on. I know that I said a mouthful. I know, honestly, the vibe I got with it from this interview, I was like, we could talk for hours about so many issues. And I really appreciate that, because I mean, that's what I want to get back to, even though if we don't have all the same beliefs or values, that we can still come together and talk about these things and genuinely challenge each other. And I really appreciate your platform, The Independent. I really think that you need a show. You need like a national show. If you don't want to run for city council or mayor, which I think you should, I think that this needs to be a national show, because so often we have shows that are, they claim to be nonpartisan, but when after about 5 minutes you realize this is pretty nonpartisan.
Right.
And so that's one thing I really appreciate your show, because you asked hard questions, and you just let the information speak for itself. And so I just appreciate that. I appreciate your platform.
Thank you, John. Wish you the best, and I'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care.